Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you.
Very good job,
Thanks. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Are you still holding up? Can we continue with the presentations? Yes. Good. So the next one is going to be held by me and my colleague here at the Ratgeber Academy, Bakuretz. And in the first half, I'm going to briefly introduce you what sport psychology is, basically. And we chose some of the topics that Fabio mentioned to introduce you a little bit more in depth, a little bit more from the psychological point of view. So sometimes I get this question, what do psychologists do on the court? Which means that why psychologists work at the sport academies. At first it may seem strange, but hopefully by the end of this presentation you will understand a little bit more. Let's make it straight that there is two fields of sport psychology. One is theoretical work, and the other one is practical work. We're going to focus on practical work, but first I think it's worth to take a look at the theoretical work, which is crucial because they do research and observation in order to understand different phenomena. And when they do, they can build up theories and models or rejecting old ones, etc. And using those theories and models, we are able to work in practice more successfully than before. So that is basically the application of the acquired knowledge. Based on this knowledge, sport psychologists focusing on several things that are important in performance, but I listed some of the most important ones. There is motivation, emotion, stress, and anxiety management. For sure, you all have your own experiences with these topics as a coach and maybe as a player or as just a human being. And there is mental preparation, like building up scenarios before performing, visualization that Fabio mentioned, which is really, really important, and internal speech that Bonnie mentioned a little bit later. Realistic self-image is something that is, I think, very important in order to get to the goal as fast as possible, and also confidence and self-esteem. What psychologists do, and maybe, I don't know, Fabio, tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe mental coaches don't do that very much, is processing and evaluating experiences on the court, with the coaches, or in private life. Especially when it comes to youth athletes, I think it's really important to help them to understand themselves and the world that surrounds them. So this is the way to get more matured. There is also, we not only work on one-on-one session, but we also do teamwork. And psychoeducation is a part of our job. It means that we keep talking about you, as you already experienced it, and to the athletes, about topics that are concerning them. It can be peak performance, they are all willing to perform at the best they can, or we should make them aware of the signs of burnout, for example. We do consultations with coaches and other staff members, and sometimes with parents too, when it comes to youth athletes, again, which is, I think, really important because one thing that is hard for psychologists, if I can be honest with you, when we arrive to a sport facility, to enter the staff team is not that easy. First, we have to earn your trust, because as Fabio said, there is this negative label, like, oh, she's a psychologist, and I'm crazy, or she's trying to read my mind. But we are not here for that. We don't think that everyone is crazy here. We are here to help. On the first place, to have the athletes to perform the best. But for that, we need more and more and more information. I think when we have a constant collaboration, as probably you experienced, then we can reach our goals faster and maybe easier, hopefully. And then we are also dealing with additional psychological issues. Hopefully, we don't meet them too much. For example, early traumas, etc. I think this is one thing that the field of the psychologists and not the mental trainers. now that I mentioned that, first we have to enter the staff team, which takes time and energy, of course. It's also pretty energy consuming to build up the relationship with the players, because they also, many times, they have the same first idea, like, okay, I'm not going to talk to him because he or she is a psychologist. But being around all the time, chatting in the dining room, hi, how are you, as Fabio said as well, is small steps toward building this relationship. And hopefully, through time, and by the time when they really need some help, they will already look at us as one of the members of the team and not some crazy person. So, yeah. And now I think from this list and from the things that Fabio mentioned, as I said, we chose 4 topics to talk about. And first is motivation. And I really want to ask you to listen to this topic not only as the coach, but only as a worker. Like, well, how is your motivation? There is this theory by Desir and Ryan, which is called self-determination theory, that we rely on a lot. But first, let's make it clear what motivation means. Motivation is an internal energy that determines all aspects of behavior. Because it determines all aspects of behavior, we have to pay attention to this. In sport, of course, high motivation is widely accepted as an essential factor to fulfill athletes' potential, especially when it comes to difficulties. Because, you know, go to training every day when everything is all right and there is nothing special going on, it's not that easy. But when you are facing big difficulties, traumas, or you are just so tired, motivation becomes crucial if he can hold up or not. Some other people, some other psychologists call it whether the athlete is passionate or not. If he or she is not passionate, if he or she is not really into basketball or the thing that he is doing, we have a lower chance to have them on the long run in the field. So this theory is based on a number of motives and regulations which vary in terms of the degree of self-determination. So there are going to be 3 main kinds of motivation depending on the degree of self-determination. There is this chart on that that I'm going to soon explain more in details. But you can see, as I said, 3 main kinds. First is a motivation. There is extrinsic motivation, and there is intrinsic motivation. Okay, I'm going to explain you all. So first, let's start with intrinsic motivation, which comes from within, and it's fully self-determined. For us, it's the best, actually. And these athletes perform the activity simply for the reward inherent in their participation. So they are doing it because they are enjoying it. The highest level of this is being in flow. I'm sure some of you heard this expression. Csikszentmihalyi is a famous Hungarian researcher, had this concept of flow, which means that you are completely immersed in the activity. You forget about your time, your ego goes behind, and you are just become one with that activity, in this case with playing basketball. And there is extrinsic motivation, which is a drive to behave in certain ways based on external sources, and it results in external rewards. What does it mean? As you can see, it had, can I go back? Yeah, it has 4 different types. The first 2 is identified regulation and integrated regulation. These represent self-determined types of extrinsic motivation because behavior is initiated out of choice, although it's not necessarily perceived as enjoyable. So an example for identified regulation is engaging in a behavior that is highly valued and it becomes integrated in one's sense of self. And an example for integrated regulation is completing daily flexibility, for example, in order to achieve ultimate goal. The other kinds, you can see we are going more and more closer to our motivation, is introjected regulation and external regulation. These represent non-self-determined or controlling types of extrinsic motivation because athletes don't sense that their behavior is choiceful. So they experience psychological stress. This is when we come to the picture. Example for introjected regulation is participating in sports in order to achieve recognition. So it's not about that I'm enjoying playing basketball that much. And external regulation is, for example, when somebody is participating in sport to receive money. And then there is a motivation, which represents a lack of intention to engage in a behavior, combined by feelings of incompetence. For example, I can't see the point of training anymore. It just tires me out. When someone gets here, either it's because there was never a motivation or either because of burnout, it's really, really hard to get back on track with these athletes. Yeah, and I brought you one technique that we use with Bonnie, and I think some of you may also use, that helps to increase motivational level, is goal setting. First, it's important to set a few ambitious but achievable long-term goals, because through empowering athletes to set their own goals, they are more likely to accept challenges. That's what I said earlier. Then we ask the athletes to set appropriate medium-term goals in order to keep them on track. And it's also important when we do with these athletes, because it's their decision. It's their promise to themselves. It's not something that I say that he should be doing or she should be doing. It's his promise. And half a year later or 1 year later, we get back to this paper, and we can take a look at whether he or she achieved this goal or not. And if not, what happened? Was it too low for him? Was it too high for him? Was he lazy? What happened there? It's also something to work on realistic self-image, which I think, as I said, very important. And we also set some short-term goals in order to achieve medium-term goals and then achieve the long-term goals. And these short-term goals keep athletes focused on the check marks, which are crucial to achieve superior performance. Therefore, these are process-oriented. These are very, very practical ones, like I go for extra running once a week, or I'm gonna be on a diet from now on, etc., etc. These are easy to check. And something that should be noted, that goals need to be monitored and revised on a regular basis. As I said, we check these goal settings in every 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And something else about goals, that they should always be smart. You heard this expression, SMART goals? And this is, you know what it means. S is for specific, so it has to be something concrete. M is measurable, like I'm going to run 100 meters under 14 seconds, for example. Achievable, so again, being realistic to yourself. Relevant and time-bound. I'm going to achieve this in 3 months, for example, because then it's so easy to see whether he got there or not. Sometime a player came to me and he said, I want to have a better mentality. Okay, what mentality means for you, what better means for you, where you are at right now, where you want to get there. So it's not concrete enough. You can't work with that. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comment or question about anything. No? Okay, so we can move on. You had? Sorry. We can move on at the end. Okay. So the second topic that I am going to talk about is anxiety. I think it's also a very common phenomenon for you and for your athletes as well. And this is a very interesting topic in psychology. And I brought you, I think, 3 different kinds of theoretical framework that looks at anxiety from different angles. Let's see the first one. It's called State versus Trait Anxiety by Spielberg. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, but basically, yeah, let's make it clear first what anxiety is. So by definition, anxiety is a mental state characterized by an intense sense of tension, worry, or apprehension relative to something adverse that might happen in the future. So Spielberg said or stated that there are two kinds of anxiety. One is trait anxiety, which is more like a staple personality feature. So he's that kind of player, he's always anxious. He is like this, which means he has a tendency to respond with concerns and worries to various situations. And there is state anxiety, which is a temporary reaction to adverse events. So it's more associated with temporary increased sympathetic nervous system activity. It sounds difficult, but with the next theoretical framework, you will understand what it means. So Martin said that we have to differentiate cognitive anxiety and somatic anxiety. This is a situation-specific and multidimensional construct, and it states that cognitive anxiety refers to negative self-evaluation and self-doubts about an athlete's ability to perform. Just something to note for you, when an athlete has high self-esteem, it's a great protector against cognitive anxiety. And then there is somatic anxiety, which is characterized by the athlete's perception of psychological elements of anxiety, such as muscle tension. So let's see some examples. Shortly, cognitive anxiety means worries and fears. These athletes say things like, I'm concerned about choking under pressure. I'm concerned that others will be disappointed with my performance. I think when you listen to this kind of sentences, psychologists can do some helpful work for you in order to understand what is behind these worries, these fears. And then the somatic anxiety is when somebody experiences that his heart is racing, or he feels jittery, the stomach is sinking, or the hands are clammy. Yep. But something that I really want to tell you, that you should not be looking at anxiety as a bad thing, because up to a certain level, anxiety can be really helpful for us. There is a difference between debilitating anxiety and facilitating anxiety. Debilitating anxiety means that it comes to a certain level for that individual, because it's individual that who and how much anxiety or stress can take, that it decreases the performance. It's not good for us. But facilitating anxiety is increasing performance. So certain and optimal amount of anxiety really do help performance on the court. Yeah, and something that we also work on as psychologists, to take a look at how the players label their anxiety. Because in terms of performance, it can make a big difference whether they label it negatively or positively. So we should not seek to eliminate the stressor, because there will always be a stressor in our lives, but to influence the athlete's negative interpretation. Rather eliminating it, using it for yourself. Make an advantage of it. Yeah, and now I'm going to give it to Bonnie, and she's going to continue with the next two topics of us, and then we can have some questions and discussions.
Thank you. Halftime. Are you okay? So, yeah. Effective coaches works with many techniques, how they communicate. It's really important. It's important how to communicate. You need to be, you have empathy. You need to have clear articulation, but the purpose of the message is important too. So sometimes the coaches, in a halftime speech, for example, they are in this big, hard situation, and they are not calm anymore. They tend to yell, for example, and that means that they lose the control. But always, in any time, you need to have the purpose, the goal of your messages. And there is a method like Eric Berner find out that from the psychological dynamics, he observed that between the people are interaction, which is really important, not only as a coach, as a player, as a human being as well. That means that how you behave with the other is really important. How to communicate with the other is the most important thing, because within these communication methods are the why. That means that there are 3 roles in your life or in your role that you find out. For example, sometimes you're like a parent. You start to criticize, you're judging, you start to dominate, because there is no time for arguing. So in a half-time speech, there is no time to, okay, but what, no. I need to say something for you. You need to say it clear. You need to say it, yeah, dominate. So sometimes being a parent is really good because there is no other opportunity. Child is a really good role because that means that you are creative, open-minded, really wants to find new opportunities. You are challenging. You will never give up. But sometimes kids are start to stubborn or being submissive. That means that if someone is an active, agile person with me, then I say, okay, I will do this, no questions. So it's a passive feeling, and you cannot control your feeling. You cannot control your emotions. That can be a child role. The best would be the adult. The adult have the assertive communication with empathy, clear informations. You share the informations, the correct informations. I feel you need to do this. I feel that you said that means for me. So you're really assertive. That would be that you are in the reality. And this model shows us that maybe the assertive communication is adult-to-adult communication. That means that we share the information clearly. We are working on it that we need to find a resolution. But sometimes we find out that someone starts to speak with us as a parent. That means that from my adult, open-minded, assertive communication, someone started to push me down. That means that as a parent, started to criticize me. He started to speak like an active, dominate person. And then I think to the child role. That means that, okay, I will do this. And this contraproductive communication called games. We find in our time, as a human being, we find so many times as in a game. Someone starts to criticize us. I start to stubborn, I tend to yell. So you always saw this contraproductive communication. But you need to find out how to be an adult, how to communicate assertive. I know on the court, there is no time to start an assertive, patiently, empathetic communication. But the most important thing is that you need to give the good information, enough information. So not only the what, the content is important, but the how. Okay. Next one, attention. You need to find out that your players, how they work, the attentional style, what kind of attention they have. We find Niederfer find out directions like external, internal direction and broad, narrow attention. What does it mean? Internal is my feelings, my physical sensations, my emotions, everything what within, in my body is, what in my soul is it said. External, the environment, the situation, so everything about around me. Broad, narrow. Broad is when you need to find just a few focusing points, the central points of your focus. Narrow is there's so many impulses, so many cues you need to understand, you have so many informations to collect. And from these directions, Niederfer find out the attentional modus. For example, when, okay, how can I start to say it? For example, an internal attention with an external environment. That means that I need to collect the important informations, filter out, for example, the fans or the parents on the court, and I need to find out the strategies. On the other hand, basketball, you need to check your players, you need to check the enemies, where is the ball? You need to filter out the parents, the yelling fans. Okay, here is the figure. What can I do now? So you need to find information from the environment and use your inner methods. Okay, then, for example, broad and internal, it's like in tennis. That means that you need to check only the ball. No matter what happened outside, you need to check the ball. Or in shooting, it's a monotonous game, but you need to check only one point. So the central of your focus is the ball. Okay, what's when broad and external mean? That means that the focus is external environment, which is really, oh, sorry, yes, that's what the basketball. So narrow and internal. The environment is complex as well, but for example, like material art, you don't need to handle with the environment. Only on judo, tatami, your enemy. It's just a little thing because you don't need to work with the figures or there is no other players, only you and your enemy. So there are only a few informations you need to collect. Okay, the other thing, it's maybe important in physical activation more, the association and dissociation method. That means that, for example, in running, if you start to monitoring yourself, then you are fully controlled and you in contact with your body. That means that okay, how is my breathing? I need to stabilize my breathing. How is my posture look like? Because I need to stabilize my performance, but in the same time, I'm just monitoring myself. No matter what's outside, I'm just looking at me. The dissociation would be you break out your mind. That means you start to check the environment, the weather, the climate, what's happening. It's important when you have the endurance training because you do both of these methods. So sometimes you're with a dissociation method, sometimes you're with your association method. You need to use a figure. Okay, what can I do? How is my pose? How my legs are working? You need to control everything. But sometimes, if you have no energy anymore, then you maybe start to look outside. Yes, so in this, why is it important? If you find out how your player's attention would be, then you could improve this. For example, if someone is really full with his mind, he has so many impressions, so many emotions, so many informations he collected all the time from the environment, then you know that she has a really external attention. But then you can say, okay, let's start focusing. For example, only for your legs. Then we start to kick off the unnecessary informations. Or if someone has so many thoughts, he cannot collect what would be important or what could be not, then you could train her like, okay, then say out loud your emotions. Because then she started to focus on each emotion, on each thought. And then, when you say out loud, then you make it clear, more clearer than before. Okay, and how can you work with mottos? How can you focus more effective? Many people start to self-blaming, judging, I'm not good, I need to give up, I cannot do this anymore. You need to stop with this. You need to change the negative narratives to positives. How? This is the method. Never use the word no. I'm not good. You don't need to say this, because if you say I'm not good, then you really think that you are not good, because in your brain this formal is there. So you need to push this formal down or back and find a good sentences, because it's really worked. Never use counterproductive words. I can't, I will give up. If you say this motto again and again and again, that means that in your brain is this negative narrative. Make your statements accurate, specific. As Anett mentioned, your goal or your purpose need to be specific and measurable. So I focus on my wrist, for example. It's so specific. I focus on only one body part. So in attention, if you have so many things to do, if you need so many things to focus on, it's too much. Then focus only one body part. I focus on my wrist, for example. So it's really measurable, concrete, and it helps for you. The sentences must contain only positive content. Yes, I said, my legs are fast. Not that, oh, my legs are out of work, because you need to have these positive narratives. Be short, be clear, just like a motto. Yes, we have no time for long, dramatical sentences. Speak to yourself kindly. Yeah, I think in youth sport, but yeah, in every type of sport, we are not always kind to ourselves. We judge ourselves, we sabotage ourselves, we have always this self-blaming. Let's start to trust in ourselves, so be kind of yourself. Yeah, and repeat it. As I work with kids, we will start to make positive mantras. We write down just like a song. And I always give them as a homework, okay, then let's learn this song. And if you're on the court and you find out that I start shaking, oh my God, I cannot do this, I'm not good. No, let's sing this song. Because these positive narratives can change your mind, can change your focus, because these mottos help you. Okay, what can I do? I need to check my food, I need to check my wrist. So it starts to focus on your body and for the good method. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. And if you have any question, Anett is here, I'm here, so we would be happy if you have any.
Okay, so one of the first questions is, do you both think that players need idols? Or how can an idol, send an idol, have an idol, can help a player to motivate or be motivated?
I think yes, because in every situation, you need a model, an idol. And for example, the coaches could be an idol too, because the kids watch you. The focus is on you, right?
Yeah, I agree. But sometimes I met this situation when an athlete said to me, but I don't have an idol. So in case if he or she really doesn't have one and she's not willing to have one, I don't force it. I think it can be very helpful. And why they can be helpful? Because it's the same when you are reading a book or watching a movie or following someone's career. When you are focusing on that person so much, in a way, you become one. So what he or she goes through, the difficulties, you feel the same thing when you're watching the movie, when the main character is suffering, for example, and you can feel the suffering small. But then he finds the way to solve the problem, and then he wins in the end, of course. And then you can feel in small the same happiness that thanks to trying hard, you can get there. So for that, to bring these emotions on the surface, I think they are very, very helpful to have idols, yeah. And thanks to these modern days, you have so many documentaries, for example, on different channels. So it's, because nowadays kids don't read that much, but to watch them, I think it helps a lot. Yeah.
Do you know, or do you have any technique that can help to reduce anxiety, for example, during the games, or something to help fast?
Yeah, first of all, I think breathe in and breathe out. I think that's the most important thing. If you have any problem, first just start to breathe. And the other is, maybe if we have time, I can show a progressive relaxation, that it's really easily, and it's about that you focus on your body parts, so concentration improvement. And while you're focusing on your body parts, you start to tense your muscles, and suddenly when you start to relax and breathe out, then this tension get to relaxed. And that means that if you suddenly relax, not only your body, but your soul could release. That means that you start to, from your top, from the bottom, to start to tense. That means you squeeze your palms, push your hands to your torso, and so on. You push your legs down to the floor. So for 10 or 15 seconds, you're really like in a tension. And after it, you just breathe out so you just breathe out, and then you get relaxed. And if you do this 3 or 4 times, it's in contact.
Yeah, this is especially good for when you are experiencing somatic symptoms of anxiety. So this repeated, how you say it, I'm sorry, squeezing and then letting out, is helping to relax your body. It's simple biology. Okay, thank you for the question. Any more questions?
You mentioned realistic self-image. You mentioned realistic self-image.
Yeah.
Many times we experience that players don't have a realistic self-image about themselves. How can we have this?
Yeah. Well, that's not easy. And this is really something that I experience a lot, which is funny because sometimes when I go to see trainings, I can see the coaches giving so many feedbacks to them. But somehow the message is lost, and when they come to me, and then the picture they build about themselves to me is sometimes different from the picture that I get from the coaches. So, and sometimes I even have my own experience with that athlete that seems strange to me how she or he thinks about himself or herself. So one technique that I use, and when I'm very lucky, the coaches can get involved too, is that first I ask kids to list all attitudes or skills that he or she thinks that is important for performance in his sport, in this case in basketball. It can be physical skills and mental skills, for example, passing, concentrating, etc., etc. I think just doing this can give us a very vivid picture of how he or she thinks about basketball and performance. Maybe you, as a coach, look at this paper and you can see that there are so many important things are not listed. What's wrong? He doesn't think it's important, so something went wrong between the messages. And then, when we have the list, and by the way, I also do this in team work, And it's so nice to see when the kids are sharing their opinion about the important skills in basketball, and they are arguing over it, like which is important and not. So anyway, and then I asked them to evaluate themselves from 1 to 10. 10 is the highest point. Like what he or she thinks that, how he or she good at that skill. So in the end, we got to so many points, like my concentration is 6, my passing is 9, etc., etc. And then, because improvement cannot happen fast, focusing on everything. So when I said with the goal setting, first, or Bonnie said before, you have to focus on 1 or 2 things at the time. So we can list these points, and you can say, okay, I think that my, I don't know, passing is worse, so I'm going to work on that in the next 3 months. It's a goal setting. Then he has to work on that with the coach. But when he says, okay, I need to be more aggressive on the court, then he has to work with me on that, and with the coach too. So, and here comes the coaches involved. Because if he or she has the time, I ask the player to go to talk to the coach and show this paper and have a discussion, which is always really important to talk, to discuss these things, because I think that's what brings us forward and forward. So first they can talk about whether this list is full or not. And then you can give, again, very realistic feedback, like why do you think that you are not aggressive on the field? You just yelled at the I don't know, enemy yesterday, or something like that. So that's the beginning of discussing more realistically the player's performance. And then we can take a look at this list time to time. So 3 months later, we can say, okay, did you improve the skills that you set yourself as a goal? But what happened with the other skill? It's decreased. You have to learn then to focus well on the different things. So that's one technique that I use.
So you're saying that there's more common that children has more negative self-image than the coaches has?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that many times. I don't know if it's more common or not than having realistic self-image, but many times they don't. Whether it's negative or positive, it's another question. Some players have too high expectations and images about themselves, and sometimes it's the other way around. So when I work with them, when we work with them, it's not an easy process to get more or less to the realistic one, but to build up the ego at the same time, because without ego, there is no peak performance, but staying on the ground. So it's giving and getting back, giving and getting back. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of time. But yeah, I experience it. I don't know if you experience it. We never talked about it, but I do. Mm-hmm. You too? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions?
My question is about body language. Imagine situation, we have important game, and players are waiting for me in locker room. Mm-hmm. What is more important for them, my speech or my body language? How they accept those two things?
The general theory, as far as I remember well, is that listening to body language is more important. It's unconscious, okay? But I think it's 60 or 70% that you rely on nonverbal communication than on verbal communication. But I think another, maybe a little bit more important question is whether your body language and the message you are saying verbally is in harmony or not. Because that causes the biggest problem when you say something with your mouth, but your body language is saying something completely different. And then the players can get confused, and that's the worst for performance. So I think that's the first step, to be in harmony with yourself, with your message that you want to bring them. Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, with that, the first part of our webinar is over, and we will take a short 15-minute break, okay? 10-15 minutes break, which means that 11:15 we will continue the webinar, also with Fabio again, and get ready because we can accept a lot of questions, and we will ask a lot of questions from Fabio. And so quick coffee, and we will be back in 15 minutes.